This is episode 21 of the Shame Proof Your Life podcast, the one where I talk about my first kiss with my husband. I'm your host and life coach, Danita Bremer. Have you ever received a prompting that you ignored for a long time, like 17 years? This podcast is that for me. I'm telling my stories, I'm learning from my past, and I'm inviting you along for the ride because I know my story can help others. I'm not alone, and neither are you. Okay. Immediately after recording the last episode, I knew what I wanted the next episode to be. I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, but this is a fun story and one that I always have fun telling as well. And I also thought this might be a good way to ease myself into talking about sex and alcohol and those kinds of things when it comes to shame. Today, we're not going to talk about too much shame. I do have a couple of quick little lessons learned from this story as I kind of outlined the episode. There were some realizations that I had, but other than that, it's going to be a little bit on the lighter side. So, I already mentioned that we're talking about a first kiss today. Um, I want to give you a little bit of a backstory though, because I don't know, I just feel like it needs it. So, when I went off to college in the fall of 1998, yes, I'm old. I was in a pretty serious 3-year relationship with a high school boyfriend. And then over Thanksgiving break, we got engaged, like officially. And so I was at college for, serious reasons. I was there to study and get my degree and then go home and get married, right? And it showed up. I did not hang out with people very much. I mean, a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I was like studying or in class or at work. And I didn't really let myself have too much fun. Like I was very serious, which tells you a lot about me, actually. Sometimes I still struggle with this. And after the Christmas break, second quarter, my college went on a quarter system. This new boy showed up on the dorm floor. So I lived in the dorms at college, and my kind of friend group was mostly from the people that lived on my same floor and hall. And like I said, after the Christmas break, this new boy showed up. And I remember coming home probably after class or after work. And my roommate says to me, "Oh, did you meet the new guy?" And I was like, "There's a new guy? No." And then I had this like replay moment in my mind where I was like, "Oh, I did see somebody." I was kind of rushing to my room with trying to get my keys out of my pocket, and I remember like I saw someone's feet in like a pair of sandals, but I didn't even look up and say hi or anything like that. So I was like, "Oh." And then this is the first time I did something totally out of character for me. I got up. I was like, "I'm going to go introduce myself." And I got up, and his room was directly across the hall from ours, and I knocked on his door frame. His door was open, and I introduced myself. I was like, "Hi, I'm Danita." And if he were telling the story, he would tell that a little differently, but um it wasn't like me to introduce myself to people. Like I very much kept to myself. I was like head down, study, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of like something to put a pin in is it was a little out of character for me to just be like, "Oh, I'll go introduce myself." And I wasn't much interested in him. He was a cute guy. But a lot of the girls on the floor were like falling over him and were really into him, wanted to date him. And I've never been one to like compete with anyone else. And so I was like, okay, not my type. And he was sort of, letting them. I mean, let's have some compassion. He was an 18-year-old boy, first year at college, right? I mean, of course, he was letting girls who were interested in him fall all over him. And, he was kind of taking advantage of the attention, which I don't blame him for. But I remember my kids think that this is really funny. I even sent him a letter like through the college post telling him that I thought like he was taking advantage of some of the girls and it wasn't right and he should change his tune. And speaking of shame, I look back on that and think, "Oh my gosh, I was such a know-it-all." Like I was like a Hermione Granger, right? And I don't know exactly what happened, what changed, but by the end of March, when spring break rolled around, we had had some experiences, which are for a different episode. And there were some definite question marks in my mind about what I was doing and what I wanted in my life. And I went home for spring break and I kind of put things on hold with my boyfriend. And it was like, let's just put things on hold, which ended up totally being a breakup, but it was a gentle breakup of sorts. And sometime in April, I was hanging out in his room and we'd been just hanging out the two of us, having conversation, nothing inappropriate. And I was like, "Okay, I'm tired. I'm going to bed." And so we said goodnight and I went to my room. And I remember sitting on my bed and being like grabbing a pillow and just being like, "Oh." And my roommate was like, "What is up?" She was an art student. She was up doing some artwork. And I just told her, I said, "Oh my gosh, I want to kiss him so badly." And she looked up from her art and she said, Danita, you only live once. Now, this is not a mantra I have ever lived by. Like, that is not something that I would normally ever say. You're right. But in that moment, I was like, you're right. I got to go kiss him. So I left my room and I went across the hall and I knocked on his door and he kind of opened the door a little crack, like maybe 6 or 8 inches. And he was chewing on something. And by the way, he had braces still at the time. And he's like, "Oh, did you forget something?" I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, "Oh, what do you need?" And for a split second, I thought, maybe never mind. But instead, I mustered up the courage and I said, "I realized I couldn't live with myself if I didn't kiss you tonight." Who does that? Like, that's like out of the movies or something, right? Like, people don't say stuff like that. And the only word to describe his response is cool. Like, he really was so cool. He just kind of lifted his finger up, his pointer finger into the air, and said, "Hold on a minute." And he walked down the hall to the communal bathroom. The boys' bathroom was on the other side of the hall. There were kind of like these two sides of the hall, and then this middle area where the elevators were and a common room and stuff. And he was eating Oreos. So, first of all, dear husband, who is now my husband, you waited until after I left to eat the Oreos. You didn't even want to share them with me, which it has taken me like 22 years to realize this. But second of all, I was just like, it was so awkward. So now I've told this boy that I can't live with myself until I kiss him. And he's just like finishing his bite of Oreo and then goes down the hall to rinse his mouth out or brush his teeth or whatever. And in the meantime, I'm just like sitting there on his bed, like waiting, going, da, da, da. Oh, okay, now this is really awkward. And of course, as soon as he walked back into his room, it's not like I just threw myself at him and, stuck my tongue down his throat. We had to kind of like get back into a conversation. I want to say it was like an hour or something again, talking and sitting there together with this sort of like awkward tension, like, okay, we're going to kiss. Yeah, it was really awkward. But we did end up kissing. I don't I'm sorry to say, don't really remember it that much. I only remember the I'm gonna go tell him that I'm gonna kiss him part. And then after that, we said our goodnights again, and I went back to my room. I was super tired, fell asleep. after that experience, things moved pretty quickly by summertime. So this was like early April, I think, when we kissed. And by summer, we had to leave the dorms for the summer and we had decided to move in together with another couple who I knew from high school. And so, only a couple months. And there are actually a few more sort of stories about that time between when we, were an item then and when we moved in together. So, couple lessons as promised. I've always had the belief that I was meant to marry him. Like we were meant to be together. And I have like so many more stories that are popping up in my mind about this. But it me going that night and knocking on his door and telling him, "I have to kiss you," was also super uncharacteristic of me. Like, I was this shy, kept to myself, work hard girl. Like, I didn't speak up. I didn't speak my mind. I was honest if people asked me, specific questions, but it was so out of character for me. And now I look back on that and it was almost like someone or something else had like possessed my body in a way. And I was just so outside of my normal self. Now I kind of look back and think that that was the spirit. In a way, like it was like my intuition leading me and for some reason my inhibitions were really low and I just like went for it. And I can see how that now, like at the time, I wasn't going to church, I wasn't active at all, but now I can see how that kind of lines up with how I act when I feel a spiritual prompting. And the other thing that I can look back and identify was just that like intuition, my mind versus my intuition, and two experiences. One, when my mind is saying, "Yes, we should do this," but my intuition is like it feels stalled or stuck. And then the opposite of that, when my intuition is like, "Go, go, go," and my mind is like, "No, we can't do this." So, as I look back on my experiences with boys, especially my high school sweetheart who we had been dating for 3 years, and on paper and in my mind, it just this is what was supposed to happen. We loved each other and we kind of grew up together and it just made sense, like logical sense. But now I can kind of look back and see how there were several different experiences where my body, my intuition was like, no, screaming at me, no, and I wasn't listening. And then the opposite experience with my now husband and getting together with him, it was like my intuition was pulling me along and my brain was like, what are we doing, who are we, what's going on? But now I can kind of see how I almost always follow my intuition. It's just a matter of time of when my mind, my brain, my logic catches up or gets on board. And then the last thing is just that, best laid plans don't really mean much when you're like a teenager or a young adult. Like so many things are changing in your life and you don't quite know who you are or who you're not or what you want. And I hear very often young people, especially, people in the ward who are graduating from high school and going away to college, and they have these sometimes very strict ideas of what they want to happen. And my advice is always, and I think this is good advice for everyone really, is just hold your plans loosely because you really never know, right? My intuition ended up being great. In fact, I'm kind of asking myself, why don't I follow it more? Like, what is in the way? And of course, it's just my mind, my thoughts about what I think should or shouldn't happen. I mean, my husband's a great guy. We're celebrating 20 years of marriage this year, and we were together for 2.5 years before that. And even though my brain before I got together with him was like, he's not a good guy, he's just here to, hook up with girls and he's taking advantage of them. really, once I got to know him, I realized like, oh no, he's a really great guy, but also he was an 18-year-old boy, like I said. So, my intuition was good. It's something that I should follow more and that I should dive even deeper on paying attention to when I'm feeling like led, like I almost like I can't not do the thing versus when I'm trying to convince myself of this is the right thing and we should do this but then it doesn't quite feel right. So this is something that I'm diving pretty deep into right now in my life. I'm trying to practice connecting with my intuition and following it more fully every day, but I do see how the first probably 35 years of my life, it was a dampening of my intuition and we can't listen to you, you're not right. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of shame comes from. It's like me, how I am, my feelings, my whatever, my gut, my intuition, whatever you want to call it, I can't trust it. And so I have to ignore it. I have to kind of push it down. But I think it's such magic when we open up to it and we start trusting ourselves. And like I said, I'm not super great at it yet, but outlining this experience really helped me see a very big contrast between when my intuition is like, let's go, and my brain's like, and then the opposite as well. Okay, that's enough for now, and so are you. Until next time, go be you and follow your intuition, aka the spirit. I would be ever so grateful if you would rate, review, and share the podcast because you never know who's struggling and who needs it. And that's a great way to get it in front of new people. And I'd also love to continue the conversation. One thing I'm learning is that one of my strengths is discussing the things that I'm learning with people around me. I would love to do that with you. Come find me on Instagram or Facebook at Danita Bremer Coaching.